the back. Keep an eye on everybody for now. And then if you are behind someone with one of these safety vests on, move in front of them. Let's try to not get lost until we know our way around a little bit. This is called Maxwell Creek Watershed, the watershed that we're in. Has anyone heard of that? Yeah, okay. So this watershed is really an important watershed for the community. Yes?
The indigenous name for Mount Maxwell is Humetitsum.
Humetitsum, that's right. Humetitsum. This is the Humetitsum. And this area is fed by Humetitsum. So even though we're on the sort of backside or the north-facing side, the water coming from Mount Maxwell flows this way too. And so Humetitsum is feeding all of this watershed with water. These mounts on Salt Spring are really, really important for collecting water and making it available when we're having the drought in July and August. So this area also is really important because these forests help to hold the water in place. So Lake Maxwell is a really important lake, like St. Mary's Lake, and it provides water, contributes water to about almost half the people on the island. And so this forest is also protecting the water supply. And what we want to do is we want to learn more about how First Nations steward these forests, because these systems, because these are the traditions that kept these forests so healthy and really diverse. And so we're I like to say, we're going back to the future. Everything that people knew we want to do again. How would you like to start? Because some of the things I thought is we could look at some plants. It sounds like people really know something about plants in this group. So we could look at some plants because Angeline's really excited to show you some of what she's been finding here. So we thought we would do that, and we also want to look at some of the things that we're doing to increase the carbon and the moisture in the ground. And I thought we could construct something to help retain moisture in the ground.
Love what you said, because that was what got me so excited, Ruth, when we talked, is that you get to bring these guys into your scientific method and process where you don't know all the answers yet, and you're not just talking down to them, but they get to be scientists with you.
I would love you guys to be scientists today.
We're going to do a little bit of bushwhacking now. There's just an old trail, but we're going to avoid the nettle at the beginning, so we're going to cut through, and then we can follow the pathway this way. So just take your time, and we'll go slow and watch your step. Try to be mindful of the plants as well.
Grace is going to do some soil moisture measurements, and we'll see maybe what's different.
Fancy thing I think you were asking about, Oliver. This is how we measure soil moisture.
And so part of the reason when we walked in, you remember Angeline said we cut some trees down on the right-hand side. We cut trees down because we need to start putting more trees on the ground. One is because they're too close together and they're competing with each other for light and for water. But the other, and so we want some of them to get big, and we want them to be healthy and not stay weak and small. But what we also want to do is start recovering these organics back into the ground. And this can also support all kinds of plants that couldn't grow in the ground, the soil right beside it, because it's got different nutrients, because there's no competition, right? You get in there first, then you get to grow. And that's what who said nurse log? Somebody said yeah, nurse log. Do you want what can you tell us a little bit about nurse logs?
Nurse logs are like dead trees that have fallen over and started to decompose, and then they're so full of nutrients, and then that little like shoots of new trees and salal and ferns grow on them. It's a really it's kind of like, has anyone heard of like protein shakes that people drink?
Yeah, protein shakes.
It's kind of like that for the forest.
It's a protein shake for the forest.
That is so cool.
I think we need little buttons.
These like nurse logs and decaying logs have really high moisture measurements a lot of the time.
Upwards 20, 23.
Yeah, 20
Yeah.
towards 30. They hold a lot of moisture, yeah, and so that is exactly what they're meant to do, and that's part of the reason why nurse logs are so important.
Shayla?
22.3.
Yeah. And what about a low moisture? Moira?
7.3.
Right on. I think we got the
I
rain.
know we did some thinning and there's a lot of like very young trees on the ground. They're not yet decomposing. Why don't we see more of the old decomposing wood in this area and like in the whole watershed? Why don't we see more?
Yeah, so all of the forests that we're standing on have been logged at one point or another. We were talking about it earlier as well. All these trees, like they're around the same age, right? And so that's like, those are characteristics that you see in log forests. And so the wood has been taken out of this. And so we don't have a lot of these decomposing logs in the forest. And so one of the reasons why we decided to build these structures is to bring back more of them to the forest, because there is a lack of nurse logs here. So we built these a few months ago. There's a few of them scattered around through here that you can see. And right now we're monitoring them to see how they retain moisture. And they actually are retaining quite a bit of moisture as well. Oh wow, it's actually higher this time now. So it looks like the moisture level is around 40 on this log here. 6.9, 7. That's really low about this.
What is it reading?
This one's 7 and this is 10.
Okay, so when you're
Yeah.
standing up, you lose a lot more moisture.
Yeah, so Ruth briefly mentioned it, but what we're going to do next is make a more simplified version of something like an assembled nurse log, but we call it a swale instead. Something that's a bit easier to construct that you could do at your own home if you want to. Essentially, we're going to take branches and put them into depressions like that have more moisture in them, and then we're going to stamp them down, and we're going to turn this coarse woody debris and small branches into something that retains more moisture and then is less of a fire risk. Yes.
What is it used for?
So the goals with this are to retain moisture, increase decomposition, reduce fire risk, and even increase species habitats. And so it kind of provides a whole host of benefits that we're looking into to try to create these healthier, more structurally diverse forests. So we wanted to choose an area that is a hollow or a ditch, because those are the areas that might retain more moisture, because the moisture and water goes down slope and pools in these types of places. And there's also lots of wood around. There's some bigger logs, there's a bunch of smaller branches around here, and those are the types of branches that we want to rearrange to make sure that they retain moisture and don't catch on fire. Because these are what will dry out a bit more and potentially catch on fire. So we're going to first begin by clearing off anything that's already on the site where we're going to be building the swale. And then the next step will be to disturb the soil a little bit. We want to make sure that we have really good ground contact with the branches, because it's that contact that will help encourage decomposition. And then we'll go and stamp the branches down to really just make sure that they're touching as much as possible. You know so much.
What's the next step?
So, how do we think this looks?
Good.
Anything else?
Wait.
I would
Jump.
love to hear your expert
Can I jump?
opinion. Need a few more jumps?
Here, can I jump?
Yeah. So then the next step is to put soil on it, and then we're going to do one thing differently with the swale as well. So the dirt is going to help retain some moisture on top of the tile, and so we're basically creating like forest floor with this.
Here, can I jump this time?
A little big.
Like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Do they all feel pretty secure? Yeah. And so, what do you think is going to happen?
This one
through these
is nuts.
oysters.
Stuff might grow on it.
Stuff might grow on it.
I found another one of these.
Yeah, it might decompose.
Animals might go on it.
Yeah, animals might go on them. A whole bunch of different things might happen to them, and so that's why we have them here, so that we can come back in half a year, however long it takes to see how they change. And they're basically serving as indicators for what's happening to this pile as a whole.
So I heard so many of these terms like canopy and like shrub layer, and I was like, I wanted to understand it more. And so there's a little like picture here, but can you tell us about like all these, like you were talking about all these layers?
Yeah, so we'll think of this as like a diagram of the forest system and how it works in a simplistic way going up. So you have what I would consider maybe horizontal diversity, which is diversity of species, and then you have vertical diversity, which is differences in the age sometimes, or the growth height, and where they are on the landscape. So you start with your soil layer, which has the microbes and all of that, and then you move to the bryophytic layer, which are the mosses, the lichens, all the stuff on the ground, which not only interacts with the soil and holds in that moisture, but holds in the nutrients. And then above that, there's the herbs and forbs. So those are things like cleaver, miner's lettuce. And then you move up to the shrubs, which are your more leathery, resilient plants such as salal or Oregon grapes. You also get saplings in there, like young trees. And that then goes, and the age, if they're a tree, they become part of the canopy layer, the tree layer.
Yeah, that's really neat to hear that. Just like all these layers are really necessary for the overall health. And to me, I think of like people of different heights, right? Like if I lost something, like something rolled under a little space and I can't get to it, I'm like, okay, like Nolan, you get that. But then like if I needed something up really high and I couldn't reach, I'd be like, Ollie, grab it. You know, all these different heights are helping out.
And they're different. Every person brings something new to the table, a different perspective or a different skill, and we need all of those working together. And think of like the forest is an ecosystem, but another way that they're separated is by communities. They really are a community, like people are a community, and you need diversity in all spectrums with that.
There's such a richness having kids of all ages and sizes like we have, and elders. Like we've had over 50 mentors come to us in our program, and they're like those, big ancient, like the grandmother trees.
The way I've always thought of it is like the grandmother tree is like our elders, like the indigenous elders that, it's not only they're losing their own culture and their community when that tree is cut down, we are losing that elder and that connection to that place, that history, and that's something that everyone, no matter where you are, it impacts you.